What's going on, everybody? We are here again doing the third part, and I'm gonna be honest, this might be the last part because I wasn't expecting to do a third part. But I'm back on here again with a guest that y'all have seen. Y'all saw him recently when we was talking about blurs and white supremacy. But I'm now having him back on here again to talk about this topic about the white savior trope and why it is not seen as woke. This is the third part. I'm thinking I'm calling this the conclusion because I probably won't do another part after this because it's like you don't want to stretch it out too much because it's like what else really can you really say about the particular topic? And like I said, I wasn't planning on doing a third part, but when I posted up not the thumbnail, but the image on my Instagram page, Cool Colas reached out to me and said that this was a good topic and he wanted to contribute to it. And I said, with what he talks about, he would be a perfect candidate to talk about this topic at length because I know he has a lot to say about this. It's probably a topic he's probably touched on 9 times out of 10. So I can't wait to see what he has to say. But Cool Carlos, before we get into it, let the people know who you are just in case they aren't familiar with you, even though you just recently came on my channel for the first time like a little over a week ago.
Right. Okay, so as Taurean Rain kind of said, my name is Cool Colas. What I do is I pick apart a lot of different topics as it pertains to pro-blackness in the blurred space. I do that on Instagram. I look at them with a fine-tooth comb and, some of the tropes and other issues that I see that are relevant. But I also talk about some other like good things as well that are relevant to like the blurred space. In the process of doing that, I'm also trying to create different books and my own comic brand at a certain point as well, too, to show people, hey, look at the stuff that we're looking at right now. This is where the disrespect kind of happens. And then when you look at my brand, you'll see the difference. You'll see where I'm trying to empower like our people and I'm trying to create stories, like show that we need to tell our own stories.
Right. So cool. So you are more than familiar with the white savior trope. With everything that you talk about, this is something that is not new upon you. It shouldn't be really new on anyone. But one thing I've always said that is when I've noticed when it comes to the white savior trope is that I noticed that it comes up a lot in a lot of non-superhero movies. Of course, we know that they can come up in superhero movies, but I find that a lot of them happen in non-superhero movies, especially films under the category of drama. You always got to have the person that's coming down, to help the urban schools and help the urban kids save themselves from themselves and whatnot. And that's why I was mentioning in one of my previous discussions when I came to talking about this. I appreciate movies like Lean on Me and Coach Carter because it didn't have the white savior trope where they could have easily inserted there. There could have easily been a white Joe Clark. There could have been easily a white Coach Carter. But I'm glad that they didn't do it. And I think what helped is the fact that both of those stories, well, I know Lean on Me is definitely based on a true story. I don't know if Coach Carter is. I think it might be. But I'm glad that they didn't do it with that. And what I liked is that they used two masculine black men to do it. Like there was no agenda there when it came to that. So I guess my first question to you is, how do you define the white savior trope?
Okay, so with the white savior trope, it's kind of complicated because I think that it shows up in a lot of different ways that I think a lot of people don't realize. One of them is psychologically. And with the white savior trope, essentially what you're doing is you're taking a character who is white and you are making them somewhat of that savior for a character that generally is non-white. But typically, where I see it the most is when it is a white person who is trying to essentially save a black person in a movie or in a TV series. So I see that show up the most. But the reason why I say it's psychological is because I also see like patterns with it as well too. I see, just from my perspective, I see typically in a lot of like movies, you'll see a white woman who is kind of the savior of somebody who is black. Typically, it is a black male. Almost every time it's a black male. And usually when that white female is the actual like white savior, she's the main character, and the spotlight almost goes on her.
Yeah.
with like whenever I see a white male who is the white savior, typically from my perspective, they're a side character and
Mhm.
they're generally like doing something to kind of save. Sometimes it'll be a black male, sometimes it'll be a black woman, but typically they're a side character, whereas the white woman is typically the main character.
That was a very interesting insight because I didn't even think about it like that. But when you put it like that, it actually makes sense because when you think three of them come to mind, one of them is right above your head, and that's the blind side.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
that's like that's the perfect example for that because you had Sandra Bullock's character who was the main character, the
Mhm,
person she's saving as a side character. Then you had Dangerous Minds where Michelle Pfeiffer was the main character, where all the other kids were the side character. Then you had that movie Freedom Riders. Hilary Swank was the main character, and all
mhm.
the black kids were the side characters. So
Yep.
I definitely see what you mean. And then to use an example with the side character with the male, is 12 Years a Slave. Brad Pitt just came out of nowhere. He was
Mhm,
just there. I said, because he got that producer credit, they said, we just going to throw you in there because you're a producer on the film.
mhm,
And he comes in and he saves Chiwetel Ejiofor's character to
mhm.
get him out of bondage after being a slave for 12 years. So I didn't think of it like that until you actually so you put it into that perspective. And I
Mhm.
think that's like an ongoing theme, and that's definitely done on purpose. And it
Yep.
kind of translates into real life. We can use like with the white female teacher. Think about it. In real life, the majority of teachers are white females,
Mhm,
and then a lot of them can be placed into a majority black enclaves, like counties where there's a majority black district
mhm,
or something of among those sorts. I know that firsthand, especially growing up where I went to elementary school. A lot of my elementary school teachers, the majority of them were white women, where
mhm.
they were the minority in the school. When you think about the demographics, but it almost looks like like the NBA or the NFL, where most of the players are black, but the
Mhm.
owners are white. That's
Yep.
kind of what it looked like.
Yep. Yep. And I wanted to actually comment on that. And the reason why I said this is psychological is because I think that's exactly what they're trying to do in the movies when they portray that white savior trope. And I'm gonna, as Tariq Nasheed would say, I'm gonna put the tinfoil kufi on just for a quick second. I have to just to say this. From my perspective, I think it's to try to make that white woman seem like the ultimate maternal figure, and
Mm,
to some extent, it even can be it kind of goes into like that sexual territory as well too.
yeah.
If you
Hmm.
see a white woman all the time as like a black male, because black males are the typical people who are being helped by this white savior who is a white woman, like they
Hmm.
kind of become attracted to a certain extent to like that type of like almost like motherly figure that they're trying
Mm,
to present. And that's why you see that them a lot of times as teachers, and you see them in like these white savior s type of movies. So it's
yeah.
to ultimately present this image as this white woman being this maternal nurturing individual who will go way out of their way to help, who is going to be somebody who they would present as their child, and in some cases as their pet. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Because they actually did that in that movie. You remember that movie called Ruby Bridges?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they did it with that, with where when she was one of the first children, first black kids to help integrate the schools,
Hmm.
and her teacher was a white woman.
Hmm.
Like just
Yep.
the one that actually like cared for her and whatnot. They even did it a little bit in the movie Birth of a Nation, not the original
Yep.
one, but the one with that Nate Parker did.
Nick Parker.
That
Yep.
the one that gave him the Bible to read when he wasn't supposed to be reading was a white woman. But
Hmm.
even then, she told him that he could only read certain parts
Hmm.
of that Bible and not the entire thing, which of course, the curiosity got to him, and that's what led him to doing that revolt. So it was
Hmm.
a little bit, they didn't go full throttle with it,
Hmm.
but it was alluded to a little bit in that aspect. But yeah,
Sure.
I said one. That's why I was saying one of the biggest when it comes to the white savior trope. I think when it comes to media, they definitely use that white woman a lot.
Oh
That's
yeah.
why. That's why. Also, another one, a perfect example is that movie, The Help.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
another perfect example of a white woman helping
Hmm.
out these black women who are maids for these white supremacist women again. And that
Hmm.
also, that movie also showed you right then and there how um the white female is probably worse than the white man when it comes to their racism. it
Mm-hmm.
showed it right there in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then, like I said, they do other little things as well too. Because if you look at most of these white women who are in these types of movies as well, notice that they're not really like unattractive. They're actually kind of attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it that way to again present this image of them being, you know, attractive, but also being like a motherly figure that somebody could attach themselves to.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of tell you a quick story real quick since we
Go
actually were
ahead.
talking about it. But so last year, I believe it was, my wife and I, we did this anniversary trip. And we what we do typically when we go on these trips is we'll you know, like do some fun stuff in a new city. I think we were in New
Mm-hmm.
Orleans at this time. And like at night, like we'll be in the hotel kicking it, and then like
Mm-hmm.
we'll just randomly watch some stuff that we just typically don't watch, right? So I saw one movie that came on like the TV, you know, that we were watching, and the TV channel we were watching. And it was, I think, called the Good Lie or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had Reese Witherspoon in it, and it had these three dudes who were like Africans. I think they were supposed to be Sudanese in the actual story, and I think it's
Yeah.
based off of a true story. And
Mm-hmm.
at first, like when I first saw it, I started laughing. I was like, "Look at this shit!" And so my wife, she was like, "Do you want to turn this off, baby?" I was like, "No, keep this on because I kind of want to see what they do in this movie."
Yeah.
So as I watched it, I saw all types of white saviorism in it. I mean, they had her like picking these like Sudanese dudes up from the airport. They were staying at her crib. She trusted them. She wasn't worried about what they were or were not going to do. That's why I said it's almost as if they were like children or pets to a certain extent.
Yeah.
The spotlight was on her the entire time. She was like going and talking about getting them jobs and kind of running up in people's faces and talking about how she wanted, you know, like these people need help, yada, 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 yada. And so as I was watching this, I was like, this is like white saviorism on crack. Do people like not see this? And
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea there is to put the spotlight on the white person, the white savior, so that it shows the way that they are facing, from my perspective, racism and how they react to like it actually happening. So instead of focusing on the way that the racism impacts like this person who is black or these people who are melanated, it shows like the way that it's impacting like the reactions of that actual white savior. So that's why I said it's very psychological. So now you're putting this person in a good light, you're giving them like depth as a character, but then at the same time you're making like the black character that's actually being impacted and who's being saved, you're making them kind of stoic, as if like they
Mm-hmm.
don't have a personality outside of that trauma. So those are
Yeah.
other little psychological things that I noticed. I want to just tell you that story real quick because when I saw that movie, I was like, this is some white saviorism shit. And I never hear anybody talk about this movie.
Right. And you said it's called The Good Lie.
I believe it's called The Good Lie, and it's with Reese Witherspoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds familiar, but I don't watch a lot of her movies outside of Cruel Intentions. but
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
but yeah. And also too, translating into real life, and I've seen this so much, especially when it comes to sports,
Mhm.
especially with the black athletes, especially the NBA players.
Mhm.
Whenever they decide to
Mhm.
want to genuinely speak on something that's dealing with black people and in the community, then you have white people coming out and saying, having such an issue with it, and then they'll throw this in there about,
Mhm.
well, you make all this money, why are you speaking on it? As basically they're trying to say is, we're
Mhm.
paying you to
Mhm.
keep quiet, and just as Laura Ingraham told LeBron James, shut up and dribble.
Mhm. I remember that. I remember that.
So it's like that's another aspect into, it's almost like they're saying we're giving you hush money, but the thing is, you're not signing their checks. Their checks are
Mhm.
getting signed by the organization. You're
Mhm.
just paying money to wherever they're playing at for upkeep. Like the money you paid to go see them is chump change to them. They already got a multi-million-dollar contract as soon as they sign their name on the dotted line saying, I'm gonna play for this team. That money doesn't come from you, but a lot of them have this thing in their mind that by them coming to pay to see them play or sit in a suite or in a box or wherever they sit at, that
Mhm.
somehow they're contributing to their cause. You could literally not come and see them play and they'll still be good, because remember, they got outside endorsements as well that
Mhm.
pay them even more and probably better than what they're making in the NBA, especially, or if they invest, that doesn't come from them. But see, that goes again back into not only white saviorism, but also white elitism of saying, I'm paying you, you're going to act as I say. When I say jump, you say how high. That's basically like another thing that they go into. Can you, give your thoughts on that?
I think the idea is that when you look at a lot of like sports, especially when you look at football, I'm just going to give an example right there. It's kind of like a big plantation. See,
Oh,
me personally, me personally, I have never really been into sports like that. Like I like playing sports, but I don't like watching sports that much. Never have. But now that I've been kind of really kind of getting the full picture of what's actually going on there, I really don't like it because it is kind of like a big plantation where you got again a lot of black players and then or like athletes, and then you have like somebody who's white who usually is like either the coach of that team or owns that team or whatever the case is, whatever you have it. And so from my perspective, I think it's just like that because you got to think about like the whole thing with like Jerry Jones, for example. Like, look at that situation. He was, criticizing and making comments about black people like not standing for like the flag and all this other stuff, right? But then at some point, like he gets caught up in this thing where there's a picture that shows up of him, basically, trying to stop black people from getting an education during, that whole little segregation thing. And so then like, it got to the point where, psychologically, I think a lot of people, like not even just the people who are like the athletes that are in the NFL, but even people on the outside started to kind of see him as somewhat of like a slave master from a psychological standpoint.
I gave him the nickname Master Jerry for a reason, because you can't tell me. Looking at him now, he just looks like a slave master. Like he looks like he owns a legit plantation. Like he looks like a descendant of Calvin Candy from Django.
It's true though. But yeah, what I was gonna say though is that with that, I noticed that just from when you see the likes of people like Stephen A. Smith, think about it, he's not an athlete at all, but I mean, this dude is like hella coming to his defense. So it's almost like this idea of this person being an important figure even permeates into the minds of people who are sports enthusiasts, not even just like the people who are actually on the actual plantation. Now, every now and again, you're going to get a runaway or somebody who's going to revolt back, or like you're maroon, and that's where you get somebody like a Colin Kaepernick or somebody like that who may speak up and they may say something. But for the most part, a lot of them are going to be so indoctrinated they're not even going to see that person as evil, wrong, or whatever you have in the way that you view racism. So I think that is a thing where it's a psychological process that doesn't just affect like the athletes, but also affects everybody else around it.
And also, while speaking on the topic of sports and athleticism, think about this too. When at one point there was, I think they're a little bit more diverse with it now, but at one time it was so glaring where they would have white recruiters come down and be recruiting or trying to look for new athletes to add to the roster. So it was almost like that thing of, again, the white savior swooping down from the sky like Superman to come and save the poor and downtrodden black man or black boy, to save him out and scoop him up out of the hood or out of the ghetto and whatnot. And then sometimes in some cases you'll have his mother there looking like Florida Evans on Good Times, just like, thank you. Oh my God, thank you. So it's like, that's another aspect of it that I saw. But I said it's not as obvious now because they it's like a mixed bag when it comes to the recruiting process now. But at one time, they used to always have the white recruiter, and it usually was a white male recruiter, always coming to like someone was considered an urban or a bad area to come, with a suitcase in hand, a briefcase, and a suit, to come in someone's home and sit on the couch and talk to the potential prospect and his family to see what could happen.
I can make a, because that what you brought up was very interesting. So when I think about this idea of this white saviorism trope, I think about, again, like you said, how it permeates to real life, because it absolutely does. The movies just kind of like help, and they kind of portray that image so that you can see it more, or you actually are cool with it more when you actually see it in real life. I break up the white saviorism trope in real life into two categories. There's the category of charitability and the category of rhetoric. So these are the two instances where I typically see white saviorism. Charitability sometimes is like, I'll just give you an example. A white person going over to Africa and then creating this image as if they're helping like African children, or as you said, you know, a white person, they are a recruiter and they go to an athlete's home and they say, well, we'll give you a scholarship if you come play for our school, that type of thing. They have the briefcase and the suit. So that's an example of charitability. Another example of where you see white saviorism is in rhetoric. An example of rhetoric is like somebody like, as I talked about in my recent podcast episode, Jane Elliott, or you see like a Tim Wise. The reason why I would call them white saviors as well, too, is because they're known for saying things that go against the grain of what white society, like, quote unquote, believes, like give accountability to white people. And so black people, when they see that, if there's any way that they can be saved, or any way that they can be spoken up for from a white person, they want to try to lift that up, and they want to big up that person and, quote unquote, invite them to the cookout. So I think that I see those two different types of things. And ultimately what it boils down to, and this is why I said it's very psychological, it boils down to the fact that we want white acceptance in any form that we are able to actually get it. Now, the last thing I wanted to say too is like a lot of like, even like when you see on TV, like those white the white savior trope, when you see a white male, you typically see him as a side character, but here's the kind of like gimmick that they play with that character. They usually make them either a bigot or somebody who's extremely flawed, and then they try to have them have somewhat of a kind of like a turn, and they do something that kind of saves like that black person to try to make it seem like, you know, they're just a flawed person who just didn't know any better. And a good example of that is in the movie Hidden Figures.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yep.
Yeah, most definitely. And the thing is, that didn't even happen.
No, it didn't.
That didn't even happen like in the actual story. That's something that, again, that they just threw in there, and it's like, this is supposed to be a true story, and this didn't even happen. Like how that played out the way that it did, of him going down and knocking down the sign, like that. None of that happened.
Right. Exactly. And so like when I see stuff like that, I'm like, okay, so that's the way that they do with the males. They try to make it seem like they're just a imperfect figure who like not had to kind of like learn, and now they're kind of a proponent for anti-racism and trying to and this whole people of color coalition or whatever. And so the other thing I wanted to kind of bring up, because you actually said something about this a little bit earlier, was you typically don't see this trope in a lot of like kind of nerdy, like comic-esque like spaces. I did actually want to bring up a couple instances where I did see it in those spaces. I've seen two places where it's showed up. One was in the show Black Lightning. In the show Black Lightning, you had Peter Gamby. I don't know if you saw it, but like
I watched Black Lightning, so I know exactly who that is.
Yep. Peter Gamby was kind of a white savior, and he was a side character. But here's the thing about why he was somewhat of a white savior, because notice that he was somewhat of the moral compass and the advisor for the entire Pierce family to a certain extent. I especially saw it in season 1. Think about it, he was Jefferson's like certified mentor. I mean, that without a doubt. And then what's her name? Anissa Thunder. She would sometimes consult him when she felt like she couldn't tell Jefferson and people like that certain things. She would consult him, and they were even going around calling him Uncle Gamby, but he doesn't even have any type of relationship.
No type of relation to them. Yeah, it's just a title that they gave him.
It's just a title. And then you got Lynn, who went to him because of the fact that she was jealous of his lightning, like Black Lightning's lightning, and saying that she was getting like cheated on or whatever. Like she was kind of making it into that type of thing by his lightning, because he was more in love with his lightning than her, and he was giving her advice as well too. So I'm like, dang,
almost treating him like he was the Oracle.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt, is that he was somewhat of a white savior in that regard. The second instance where I saw it, and I love this movie, so I'm not trying to slander it too much, but I did see this and I do need to call it out, is in the movie Black Adam. Black Adam had a little white saviorism too. Because if you look at Dr. Fate's character, first of all, let's be clear, Dr. Fate should be a black person. Although the actor who played him was cool, I'm not tripping on that. I thought he was cool. I felt like it's, because of the nature of the Dr. Fate character and like how close he is to Egyptian ties, he should have been black. But regardless, here's where I saw it there. If you look at, did you see that movie, by the way, before I spoil? I don't want to spoil it.
I did.
Okay, cool. So one place where I saw it with that is, if you look in that movie, you know, he was somewhat of a moral compass to a certain extent for the Hawkman character.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he was consulting him. He was talking about some of his flaws and all this other stuff. And even at a certain point, Hawkman was supposed to die. And Dr. Fate did what? He sacrificed himself so that Hawkman would not die, although
Mm-hmm.
Hawkman was black. So to
Yeah.
me, like when I saw that, I was like, that's a little white savior-esque as well, too. But that movie had so few tropes, I didn't even really speak on it too much.
Yeah,
But
I had actually listened to your podcast when
Mhm.
you were talking about it, and you like really spoke about it in very high regard.
Yeah, I really
Especially
like that movie.
especially when it came to dealing with a lot of the non-white characters. Because
Mhm.
Hawkman, in my opinion, was probably like one of the best parts of the movie. And it's crazy because
Yep.
like when Aldous Hodge had got cast in that role, a lot of
Mhm.
people, of course, you know who got upset because it was a black man playing Hawkman. And I was
Yeah.
like, here they go. I said, here they go. And
Mhm.
that's actually going to segue into the woke part of it.
Mhm.
But he was honestly one of the best parts about it. They even
Yep.
tried talking about possibly giving him a spinoff, but you know, I don't know how that's going to work
Mhm.
because DC got a whole bunch of cleaning up over there. They got to do James
Yep.
Gunn. He got to work his magic, do
Mhm.
something that's over
Yeah.
there. So maybe that'll come down the line if it does. If it does, if it don't, it don't. But it is what it is. But I said Hawkman was definitely one of the best parts. I love the fact that they had him and Black Adam constantly going at it. It's almost like sibling rivalry. Like you had,
Mhm.
it's almost like you had the Boy Scout versus the Renegade. Of course,
Yep.
Hawkman being the Boy Scout and Black Adam being the Renegade. So I
Mhm.
like that part. Like one of my favorite parts was when he was fighting inside the house and Dr. Fate was just sitting there letting them fight. It's almost like a dad watching his kids just get all their aggression out. And then the woman tried to step in. He's like, no, no, no. Let them fight. So it was almost like looking at a family dynamic. And I said
Yep.
I said those people who have siblings and grew up in a house with siblings know what that's like. Or maybe if you're around like a lot of cousins that were like siblings, you know
Mhm.
what that feels like.
Sure.
But now that segues me into the whole thing of why people do not consider or don't throw out how the white savior trope is considered as woke. As we know the word woke has completely become bastardized over like the last decade from where it once was. Of course, where it started at, and it's at its foundation to where it is now. Now we know when it comes to woke, I say how they define woke is anything that is not a heterosexual white male. So
Mhm.
that's why a lot of them will not call out this white savior trope because
Mhm.
the white savior is typically a lot of times a white heterosexual male. Of course, it can also be a white heterosexual female as
Mhm.
well, and they still won't call that out. So they
Mhm.
kind of intertwine those things there. It's even to the point where now, whenever they show trailers for certain movies, I already know what they're gonna call out and say is woke. Like for instance, with the new Super Mario Brothers movie, the minute they saw Peach flip up that spear, I said, I know somebody out there gonna say that's woke because Peach is supposed to be the damsel in distress, and Peach is a white character. So, but
Yeah.
she's not a
Yep.
white heterosexual male.
Mhm.
If Mario, who would never do that, did that, they would have been all for it. But
Mhm.
what do you think? Like, what? How do you respond when you hear how certain people like to call have bastardized the word woke and flipped it into what it is now? And a lot of them, honestly, I think a lot of them only doing it because they know there's an audience there that will like drive numbers and money and views to
Mhm.
that.
Well, I got a lot of thoughts on that whole thing. So the first thing is I want to kind of go back to the word woke and like the original definition. When I think of woke, I think about the awakening of the black consciousness or the
Hmm.
consciousness of an individual as far as their cultural history and the things that have happened. But it specifically pertains to black people because that's
Yeah,
really where it started. And that's who it's really and only about.
yeah,
So when I think of woke, I think of a word that really got co-opted, like a lot of other black words or things
yeah.
that involve black people. So
Mm.
the things that come to mind outside of wokeness are the civil rights movement, and I think
Hmm.
about the word hotep. And I'm going to tell you why I brought those things up specifically. The reason why words like that get co-opted is because and it's psychological again, is they want to kill the black consciousness. So anything that resembles some form of black awakening, they want to be able to kill it by either co-opting it or totally rechanging the way that the word actually sounds. So
Yeah.
think about it from this angle. Look at the word Hotep. Hotep is supposed to mean to be at peace. And generally it involved like somebody who was a king or somebody who was of royalty and somebody who had like this type of majesticness from like from Black culture. But now
Yeah.
it's used to mean to ridicule an individual who seems to be who a lot of people will say is homophobic and misogynistic and all this other stuff, you know. So it's been changed. And think about the civil rights movement. That's another thing. That was originally meant for Black people and to pay like some type of reparation or some type of change to Black people based off of everything that's been done to them. But all of a sudden, civil rights became a thing, not just about Black people, but about like, you know, this quote unquote people of color and women and other quote unquote minorities and all this other stuff. So now it creates this form of benign neglect. And from my perspective, I think that the reason why the word woke got co-opted into this whole thing of it being about somebody who, like you said, is not white, heterosexual, and generally a male is because it's a way to basically put a damper on like Black people talking about their issues by saying, well, look, all these other people have issues as well too. So we're all going to throw this in a category and just call it woke.
Yeah. Yeah, and also it almost feels like, you know, it's almost like for them, especially when it comes to white men, you know, a lot of them are buying into this whole, well, I don't know if they still are, but remember it was at one point, like earlier in the year, it was like a pocket of them buying into that quote unquote great replacement theory, saying, oh, you will not replace us and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that plays in, I think a lot of it is also based on fear. That's why I said in my last commentary that I did about this, imagine if the blaxploitation era was happening in 2022. I said they would have been taking so many leaps of faith right now because they would have been like, oh my God, it's too Black. It's too, they were like, where's the white people at? And all types of stuff like that. And then that's when you can catch them like, hold on. But would that be seen as woke? But then at that point, because they're backed into a corner, they'll try to redefine it again or say that you're wrong. You know, like Tariq says, I'm white and I say so. Whatever I say goes, and however I choose to define it is how it's going to be. And that's all there is to it. And there's nothing you can do about it because you're not white. I am.
Yep. You know, a lot of times what I think a lot of people need to realize is that the white supremacist likes to create double-edged swords. They like to create something that they can use as a way to say, hey, you're getting your clout, you're getting your recognition, but at the same time, they're doing something disrespectful. And even blaxploitation kind of does something very similar to that. Blaxploitation is it kind of like allows Black people to express like a certain level of consciousness and a certain level of being able to speak up for themselves and kind of feeling like, you know, powerful to a certain extent. But at the same time, it's also exploiting that Black consciousness and somewhat making it to somewhat of a caricature type of thing. So that's
most
why
definitely
it's a foolish sword.
Yeah. And I always like, I often wonder what that was like back in the early 70s to grow up during the blaxploitation era. Our parents, would know more about what that time was like. And it's crazy because the blaxploitation era does not get the credit it deserves as far as saving Hollywood. Hollywood was literally losing money. Like nobody was really going out to support films like that at that time. So Black people, they came together and they started making these pocket of movies. Of course, the theming was kind of all the same. They just used different actors and actresses to push certain, narratives forward. But now these are considered cult classics. And they did all of that and they were able to save the industry. And then once they got saved, then it's like, oh, we're done with you. The same thing happened with disco. Disco was like another form of music that Black people really helped make popular. But then when they got tired of it, they had that whole disco demolition where they all came together and destroyed all the disco music. Because they didn't want to really use it anymore. And then fast forward to, we're going back to comics or more so comic book movies. They tried doing all these comic book movies at one time, but they were all failing. And then in comes Blade. In comes Blade, Wesley Snipes in 1998, and that one broke through the ceiling. And then that doesn't get the credit it deserves as far as doing it, because a lot of people don't know that Blade literally helped save Marvel from going bankrupt. If Blade was a failure, Marvel would have been done. Like they would like pretty much everything Marvel related would have been sold off somewhere. there would have been no X-Men because that came after that. There would have been no Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
So Blade literally helped save. And the thing is, I didn't even know Blade was a Marvel product. I just
Mhm.
saw it because Wesley Snipes was in it. You know, so
Right,
Wesley
right.
Snipes, Wesley Snipes was a high commodity. So
Mhm,
of course I was, I wanted to watch it at the time. But for
mhm.
me, Blade 2 was the best one. I'm just saying, Blade. I love Blade
I
2.
did too.
Blade 2 was my
Yeah,
favorite one out of the series. Blade 3, they could have kept that. But
yeah,
Blade
I
1
agree.
and Blade 2 was like perfection.
Mhm. Yeah, I love the second Blade, so I'm definitely going to agree with you there. I feel like there were a lot of like accolades that came from the Blade movie, or really the Blade series,
Hmm.
specifically the first two.
Yeah.
And I think like the accolade, like you said, was Marvel was about to go bankrupt, and this movie really was kind of like that saving grace. The second
Hmm.
thing was it was an authentic like black character who was the saving grace for that as well too. That doesn't
Yeah.
even really get recognition. So and I feel like
Hmm.
because it was so far back, people are trying to
Yeah.
act like too it wasn't really like the
Yeah. They're
start of
trying.
all that.
Hmm.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, that's why I said all the time. Like a lot of people try to pretend like
Hmm.
Blade did not play a huge role in the reason as to why Marvel is still thriving, right now. Even going down into the MCU, there would have that wouldn't haven't existed if it wasn't for Blade. And the thing is, Blade was not a top tier character because
No,
when you think of Marvel, you think of Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. And the thing
yeah.
is, I don't think none of those movies would have thrived at that particular time, not with the limited technology that they had. So
Hmm.
they needed something that was more ground level, and Blade was perfect. That was
Hmm.
a perfect ground level character that they could have did, what they did with, and they executed it perfectly. And right now, to me, it's still held up as a classic film. Even
Hmm.
all these years later, it's crazy to believe how long ago that was.
Hmm. I agree. Totally agree with that.
But yeah, um, what would you say? Like, what movie besides the one you saw that you said that you saw in the hotel with Reese Witherspoon would you say had the most one of the biggest white savior tropes in it?
Hmm.
The
Probably
one
the
that would
blind side.
one I would say that it was so obvious that it probably annoyed you to the point where you probably wanted to turn the movie off because you knew exactly where it was headed.
Though I would say the blind side, but after I saw it a second time.
Mm,
The reason why I say the blind side is because the blind side really like did its like from the perspective of the white supremacist, it did its job. It was
hmm.
a white savior trope that succeeded because other people were pretty much bamboozled by like what was actually happening. So in other words, when I first saw that movie, like, and I think a lot of other people felt the same way too. I was like, man, this movie is great, man. Like
Mm,
this is like inspirational. Like I can't believe I'm actually watching it. Like it was just like a
right.
very very great movie. That's how I
Hmm.
saw it when I first looked at it.
Hmm.
And I think that was the idea and what they were trying to project when they made this type of movie. But then when I saw it again, I was like, this is the most overtype white saviorism thing that we could possibly have. I mean, like again, you have like a story that has already been corrupted. That's the first thing, like
Hmm.
and changed up and switched up in a way that it shouldn't have been. You have a white woman who basically has the spotlight. You have the passive black person who is their personality is really just succumb to only being about their trauma, and they're almost
Mm,
like almost even like totally like non-violent. And
yeah.
then you're also too like again, I want to make this clear. This is not an ugly white woman. This one white woman was kind of attractive.
Yeah.
So they did all of that on purpose. They orchestrated that in a way where you can't even refute how much of a white saviorism trope movie that it was. It almost is somewhat of like a, how Steve Urkel is to like nerds. That's or
Yeah.
to blurs. That's how I think this movie is to white saviorism. It just totally defines it.
Yeah, exactly. I completely understand what you mean
Mhm.
when you say that. I'm trying to think of one that I saw where it was glaring. The thing is, it was right there in my head. It was
Mhm.
right there, but I forgot it. But I would definitely say The Help for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Was
Yeah.
that one definitely had white saverism all over it,
Hmm.
because it's almost like also too because uh, um in a way because she helped them write the story and like get the book out there because she was the only one that was going to be able to do it. But it's
Hmm.
almost also too with her doing that she found a way to give them their voice to like kind of fight back a little bit
Mhm.
against them. It's almost as if they didn't have their voice before. I
Mhm.
think the
Yep.
only person in that movie that did not need the white savior, even though the white savior was there, was Octavia Spencer's character, because when she put that shit in the pot, I'm telling you right now, that was hands down the saving grace of that movie when
I agree.
she did that.
I agree. I agree.
Because
That was funny.
I honestly believe back then a
Yeah.
lot of them did that. I
Yeah.
believe a lot of them did that, but they would never tell,
Mhm.
their boss, or in slavery times, their master, what they were doing. Because I'm like, yeah, I think at the same time, these people are cooking your food and you're
Right.
treating them like
Yeah.
trash. They could
Mhm.
taint anything in your food, because they know how to cook the stuff, they know how to season it, so they don't
Mhm.
know how to hide it within the seasoning. And the thing is, she wasn't going to tell her
Uh-huh.
that she had put baked shit into her pie, but
Mhm.
she forced her hand because she was just so nasty. But
Mhm.
it was so interesting because she did it after she had took a bite of it, and even then she was still nasty to her. And when
Mhm.
she told her eat her shit, I
Mhm.
was like, wait. When I first saw the movie, I was like, whoa. I was like, wait, what? And she said, what did you say? She said, eat my shit. She said, are you serious? She said, are you talking to me like that? She's like, no. She said, have you lost your mind? She said, nope, but
Nope.
you about
You
to.
just did.
And you just did. And
Yep.
she literally had like 2 bites of that pie. Her mother couldn't stand her. That's why she was sitting at the other end of the table laughing at her. And then she
Yep.
ended up. But I think the other funny part too was when she put it in her book about
Mhm.
her doing that, but it was like an anonymous person. But she
Yeah.
knew it was her. She knew it
Yeah.
was her. And she ended
Mhm.
up getting something on her lip from it. Like that part was like, that was probably the funniest part of the whole movie. And she was
Yeah.
so well deserving to get him, because she was a very nasty person, even all the
Mhm.
way up to the end. And she wasn't a good mother.
No, I
She
agree.
wasn't. She was more the daughter.
Uh-huh.
Her little girl was more attached to Viola Davis's character than she was to her own mother. And that's another thing
Mhm.
that they don't talk about either, is that when it comes to movies like this, where you'll have it's usually the maid or a butler or something like that. They are the
Mhm.
ones that are practically raising their kids. There's even instances at one time where they were breastfeeding their kids because
Yep.
their mother wasn't doing it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, that's true.
you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say, like, I think the funniest part about all that, like, when she shit in the pie, was the fact that this woman was smashing that pie before this. She was acting like
Yes.
it was the best pie
Yeah,
ever.
ever. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how could you have not tasted that? I mean, like, how could you have not? I mean, I think it was like a chocolate pie, so it was easier to, like,
To hide.
make it to hide it. But how was you not able to taste that?
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Because
Like,
you know what chocolate tastes like, and that
right,
wasn't chocolate.
right, right. That's what made me think it was funny in the first place. But my thoughts on that are I think that there's some type of, like, from my perspective, a coincidence of white saviorism and what I call trauma sauce, which more people would call trauma porn. I feel like
Yeah,
those two kind of like go hand in hand, and the help kind of like it from my perspective, it kind of embodies both of those tropes at the same time. And I think
yeah,
what shines more is like kind of like the trauma sauce of it all, but white saviorism just happens to show up. The reason why I called that a little bit, I said it was a little bit different than like the blind side, for example, is because the blind side, the white saviorism is the thing that shows up like kind of like the most from at least from my perspective with that. But like with the movie The Help, me personally, when I saw it, I kind of felt like kind of how you did too as well. I felt like they had a character who was essentially trying to in a way, like, she was being a white savior to like a black woman more than anything in this movie.
hmm,
So
yeah,
that was showing something a little bit different. I think that the typical white savior is like a white woman, again, like helping like a black man. But I think this showed like a little bit of a different edge for that. But again, it still
yeah.
showed like a lot of trauma as well at the same
it
time.
it also it also for me too, and it just popped up in my head when I thought
Mhm.
about it. When you think about the theming of that movie and in the era that it happened in, which I believe was like the 60s. I think that's
Yep.
when I think it was in the 60s. Think
Mhm.
about what else was about to happen, the feminist movement.
Yeah.
So
No, that's
here,
true.
so here you have a white woman helping out these black women tell their story. And it's like, this gives me the vibe of them getting ready to head into the feminist movement, which of course white women spearheaded, but they needed the assist from black women because it wasn't working just solely by themselves.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
And we see what that spiraled out of control into even today.
Yep. No, that's very, very true. You know, and this kind of goes more into trauma sauce than it goes into white saviorism, but it kind of, from my perspective, pushes into this idea of I think not only did it start like white feminism, it also started like not the help per se, but just trauma movies. They started like this kind of black male hatred as well, too, to a certain extent. And I feel like these things are kind of going hand in hand. You know,
yeah, because it even kind of touched on that in the movie a little bit, because Octavia Spencer's husband, who we never saw, was abusive to her.
No, it's true.
Like you didn't see him on screen, but it was a part in the movie where she's on the phone talking to Viola Davis's character, because like they were really good friends, and she's literally talking on the phone while looking over her shoulder to see that her husband is not catching her on the phone. And then one part in the conversation, you don't see it because it's off screen, but you can hear it. She's yelling in the background while her husband is smacking her around, and then the phone hangs up, and the doubt's on his. So I'm glad you said that. It even showed like that she was being domestically abused by her husband, which would show why she was the way that she was. You know, it also because she wasn't a soft person. She was a very like aggressive person. So yeah, I think she is dealing with abuse from her husband at home, plus dealing with abuse from her boss at work. And then she has kids. I think one of the saddest parts of that movie though was after she got fired, and then her daughter had to work as a maid. Literally, her daughter had to drop out of school at like 15 to become a maid to help bring money in, because she was bringing in a lot of the money. Because I don't know if the husband worked in whatever the case may be, but in order to keep money brought in, her daughter had to drop out of school and become a maid. And that part when she was telling her, she says, no back talk, no sass, like don't be me, don't do what I did. Like don't go, because her daughter most likely see how she is, but she said don't go in there doing what I did, because one, you're not built like that. You won't be able to handle the backlash the way I am. She's like, I can handle it. After all, she put her shit in a pie. Her daughter ain't about to do that. So that for me was probably one of the sad parts of the movie that kind of gets overlooked.
Yeah. No, I agree. I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah, like I said, with these like slave-esque movies, like they kind of embody both the white saviorism trope and they embody like the whole trauma sauce thing. One movie that comes to mind too that does both as well is the Harriet movie.
Listen, I didn't even watch that. So whatever you're about to tell me is going to be like really new to me, because I didn't watch that. I had no intentions of watching it, and it's so sad because Harriet is one of our premier iconic ancestors, and they did her like that.
That's right. Yeah, and then you had Cynthia Erivo playing her, and she said a lot
of. I think that's what did it.
Yeah, and because most people they look at, oh well, she's not like FBA, so that's the main disrespect. And it's like, no, think about like she's like a tether. Look at the stuff that she's actually said. Like she's actually been kind of disrespectful to FBA culture in general. Yeah. So like for her to play that role after that, I think is really a big disrespect. But one thing I was going to bring up with the movie is that I saw was there was a white male who basically kind of saved her from who was supposed to be the antagonist, which was a black man. And the black man was played by the dude who played Hollywood. I can't think of the actor's name. He played Hollywood in Queen Sugar. He was playing the antagonist, and he was this black dude who was kind of
big along.
That's
how I know the name, because they kept talking about some black man named Bigger Long. I'm like, who is Bigger Long? And they brought up Harriet, and I was like, oh no, they didn't go there with that one.
Yep. So they like made the villain basically a bounty hunter instead of like an actual white supremacist, and
that apparently allegedly didn't even exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I heard too.
And also too, I don't know, like. I don't know if you knew, but they are about to release a biopic, another one on Whitney Houston.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah, they
heard.
about to get on called I Want to Dance with Somebody. And I
Yep.
literally had issues with this since day one, especially starting with who they casted to play Whitney Houston because she's a British born actress. That was one of my issues. But then when I looked back at the second trailer, I had did a video kind of
Mhm,
breaking down some things in there that I didn't like, but there's one thing that I
mhm,
didn't mention in there that can be related to the topic we're talking about now when it comes to the white savior, and
mhm,
that is Clive Davis discovering Whitney Houston, and how when I'm looking at the trailer, she
mhm.
seems to have all this animosity towards her dad,
Yep.
and it makes
I
her
noticed
come
that
off
too.
as and it makes her come off as an angry black woman, and it's like
Mhm.
the disrespect
I
is
know.
real. It's like it's crazy there. I don't know like really the whole dynamic between her and her dad, but the way that they're playing it up from the previews I saw, she looks very like angry like
Mhm,
towards her dad and all types of stuff. Like every time there's a scene with her dad from the previews that I saw, she's
mhm,
never smiling. She's
mhm,
smiling in a lot of other scenes, but when it comes down to her and her dad, there
mhm,
seems to be this friction
mhm.
going on.
Yep. I noticed that too because I actually saw the trailer and
Mhm.
but this is kind of what I picked up on with a lot of these like kind of like biopics that you were talking about. They
Yeah.
get a lot of not all the time, but they get a lot of like immigrants to play these types of roles, and the reason
Mm.
why is because they don't have like that same type of respect for and this is not all, this is like more of the tether class, not really immigrants, so let me kind of backpedal, use my words better. The tether class will like go and they'll try to play a lot of FBA roles and they'll be disrespectful because they don't have the same type of appreciation for our
Mhm.
heroes. And so like, you know, a lot of the white supremacists will cast these people who you know, they kind of see like, you know,
Mhm.
would be willing to kind of disrespect us, and they'll go along with a lot of the agendas that they put in these types of movies. So with the Whitney Houston movie, you saw again the angry black woman, you saw kind of like that kind of Sapphire-esque type of like thing
Mhm.
going on, but you
Yeah.
also at the same time saw some LGBT stuff going on as well
Yeah,
too.
I mentioned that. I mentioned that as well. I said I know what
Mhm.
they doing. I said they really want to pump out that thing about her and Robin Crawford because it was always rumors for years, about them, and now
Yep.
they really want to pump that out because it was a clip that I saw and I had mentioned it in the video. They had dropped the clip of when Whitney sung the national anthem,
Mhm.
and it was showing that Robin was on the sideline, standing along the side where everybody else was at watching Whitney perform.
Mhm.
And at the time, Whitney was married to Bobby Brown. I think they
Yep.
had just got married.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
he wasn't there. He was
Mhm.
at home watching on TV like most people around the nation was who wasn't there. And I
Yep.
said, that's very interesting that her husband's not there, but Robin Crawford is.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, no, that's
I even saw a clip somewhere too where they was on like maybe like another preview, but they was on a boat and Whitney Houston was all like cozied up with Robin Crawford on the boat while Bobby was there. But I even heard stories that Bobby Brown and Robin Crawford used to get into physical altercations. Like they were fighting like two dudes was fighting. Like
mm,
I actually heard that like they used to get into physical
mhm.
fist fight altercations. I'm think about Solange
Wow.
and Jay-Z in the elevator.
Mm.
That's how they used to get down.
I didn't even know that. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I had heard about I had read
Mm,
if you like it's pretty much public knowledge now. If you like look it up,
mhm.
you should be able to find it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, with like a lot of these like I said biopics, it you know, they kind of get into and from my perspective, like they put in people who they know are going to be willing to kind of go along with these little disrespectful tropes. Every now and
Mhm.
again, you get like an FBA. I see sisters mostly, who will like you know go along with certain things. Like for example, if you look at like the Woman King, obviously that was Viola Davis for the most
I
part.
did not look at the Woman King.
Well, I'm being kind of facetious when I say that. I don't mean like literally like watch
Okay.
it. If you look at
Okay.
everything that happened around it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also too, I don't know if you remember, Don Cheadle had did a biopic on Miles Davis. I think it was called Miles Ahead.
I remember
And
that. Yep.
yeah, it was
Mhm.
called Miles Ahead. And the
Yep.
movie was pretty much all done. Like, he already submitted the script and all types of stuff. The studio
Mhm.
said they loved it, everything looked nice, but there was just one issue. And he was
Mhm.
like, "What's the issue? I need you to have a friend in this movie, and I need him to be white." And he was like, "But a white friend?" He was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, Miles Davis didn't really have white friends like that." And they
Mhm.
said,
Yep.
"Well, either put the white friend in there, or we're not going to allow you to make the movie." So he basically said, "Okay." And he put a fictional white friend in there, and that was played by Ewan McGregor, aka Obi-Wan Kenobi. So the character that Ewan McGregor played does not exist,
Mhm.
but they was not going to allow him to release his movie if he didn't do it.
That doesn't surprise me. I will say though, like with Don Cheadle, like he does seem like the type that probably tinfoil Kuvi's on a little bit right now.
Mhm.
Like he does seem like the type that probably would kind of go along with some things here and there too. Because I
Yeah,
think like somebody who really wasn't really rocking with that would have just said screw it and probably would have
right.
came out about it. But
Yeah.
the
Or
reason why
made or made or made or made it himself, sort of like what Nate Parker
I made it
did with Birth
himself.
of a
Yep.
Nation.
Yep. Yep. I think he didn't want to be blackballed and all this other stuff. And I'm going to tell you
Mhm.
why I say that because I saw that you did a video on this, but Letitia Wright, when
Yeah.
she had the whole thing with the jab, that whole little issue, Don Cheadle was one of the first people to kind of like speak out about her. I guess like when people started giving her criticism, and he said,
Mhm.
"Man, if I would have known that she was talking about like the like posting videos, about like being anti jab and all this other stuff."
Mhm.
Then I would have pulled her coattail. He was saying stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah,
like,
I forgot
bro,
about that until you mentioned it.
you up there acting like a war machine in real life.
And also
So,
remember too, when he had I think he was hosting Saturday Night Live one time, and he had this shirt on. I forgot what it said on the shirt,
mhm.
but it was like, why did you wear that shirt? Like, what was the point of you
I remember that.
wearing
Mhm,
that shirt? Like, he had got a lot of flack
mhm,
from black people when he wore that shirt, because it's like, huh? Like,
mhm.
what, like, what is this? But that's a lot of times you got your go along to get along Negroes, and white people love the hell out of that.
They do.
They
It's true.
love that to death. If they can get someone on their side, they will be all for it. If they don't
Mhm.
like anyone that really goes against the grain, because in a way that does go against their white savior narrative of, I don't need you to save me. I'm going to go out here and I'm going to save myself. And I don't even need to throw a cape on.
Yep.
I'm just going to be the hero of my own narrative and really get it out the mud for myself. A lot of them do not like that. They do not like it, which is why you find that a lot of black towns got destroyed,
Mhm.
because they didn't need the assistance from them.
Mhm. Yeah.
You see that venom come right out of them when that happens.
Most definitely. And the other thing I'll say too is like even if you do have like let's say that you do have like a black celebrity or a black actor who and I'm just want to focus on the men for a second. If you have a
Mhm.
black actor who does have a certain level of masculinity and does have a certain level of like even like consciousness,
Yeah.
what I've noticed is that they do in Hollywood, specifically in comics, I'm going to talk about here for a second, is they try to demonize that certain level of consciousness. And I've seen that in multiple characters. And usually their demonization either comes from making that character a villain or it comes from making that character angry and out of touch. And the three
Mhm.
characters that I've seen in Marvel specifically where they've done that have been in Killmonger, in
Mhm.
Bushmaster, and then
Yeah.
in Isaiah Bradley. If you look at
Mhm.
those three characters, they either made them either out of touch or they made them like a villain or they made them both.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what they do too. Even if you say, you know what, I'm going to be hell bent on being a masculine black person, then they're like,
Mhm.
okay, we got you. You was going to be a villain.
Yeah. Like, because apparently black man and masculinity cannot mean positive, being a
Mhm.
hero. Like, they
Yep.
can't have that happen. I think
Yep.
they saw the impact of
Mhm.
what happened with Black Panther, more
Yep.
so like with his introduction into Civil War. And in a
Mhm.
way, they almost tried to go that route, because they almost made him seem like he was being extremely vengeful going after Bucky, because he thought that Bucky had killed his dad.
Yep.
And then in the way that they went about it, they could have really gone into the route of making him this angry black man that once he got revenge on him, would he keep on going, almost like a Michael Myers type of thing? He just became a killing machine. But
Yep.
notice too that when he found out the truth and he went out and when he got Zemo, he could have easily killed him because he knew Zemo was the
True.
one that did it. But he
True.
stopped himself and just
Mhm.
allowed whatever to happen to him, put him on the raft and just
Mhm.
like, let him stay on the raft. And
Yep.
then, and when he comes out with his own movie, now, he is almost like there was a tone shift a little
Mhm.
bit, but there had to be some balance between him and Killmonger. They couldn't have two angry black men going at each other.
Yeah.
They would have destroyed Wakanda. So they had to have like a equal dynamic of almost like light and dark, even though a lot of people really loved the Killmonger character because a lot of people could relate to him
Yep.
and what he went to, especially if you are a black American, and even more if you are a
Yep.
black American man. Like you
Yep.
could really, really vibe with that, which is why a lot of people really love this character, which is
Mhm.
why the Black Panther movie, the first one at least, was so successful.
Mhm. Most definitely. No, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's I think that they create these characters and the villains because they want to really kill, like, again, the black consciousness. They want to kill
Mhm.
this idea of an awakening because that's what Killmonger represented. And
Yes.
essentially they kind of killed it in T'Challa a little bit. And let me explain why I say that. Because if you look at the comics, T'Challa was a lot like how Killmonger was to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But like when they portrayed him in the movie, he was more passive. He was more willing to like kind of let like white people go. He didn't want to kill no white people or nothing. He really
Yeah.
didn't want to kill in general. And
Exactly.
you know
Almost
what
like
I'm saying?
Batman.
Well, I'm sorry, say that again.
Almost like Batman.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. And so like to me they killed the consciousness of T'Challa even going in, and then like they killed the consciousness of like Killmonger and other characters like that on screen.
Yeah, because I don't know if you saw the cartoon that BET did of Black Panther a few years ago,
Still
and
haven't.
you say you still haven't.
No, I need to
You,
though. I
you
need
need
to.
you need to
Yeah.
because I'm gonna tell you right now the
Mhm.
cartoon puts the MCU version to shame by
Okay.
miles. Like
Mm,
the way that they set it up in there, it was even a scene right in the movie, I think towards the beginning where Black Panther and Captain America are fighting, and
mhm.
Black Panther beat the shit out of Steve Rogers. Like, I mean, he whooped his ass all up and down that grass of Wakanda. Like, I'm telling you, he was knocking him, throwing him every like it was crazy. I said, imagine if they actually did that in the movies, but we know they would
Mhm.
never go that far. But
Nope.
it was one scene where you had T'Chaka, who is the father of T'Challa and Shuri.
Mhm. Mhm.
He got he was at a meeting where
Mhm.
he was the only black man there and it was mainly other white men there,
Mhm.
and one of the white men got out of line
Mhm.
by calling him T'Chaka and resting his hand on his shoulder. When white people do when they do that, that sometimes be seen as a form of disrespect, and I
Yep.
forgot the line that he said,
Mhm.
but it was so potent that this
Mhm.
white guy literally was like frozen and his eyes bucked like this because it was
Yeah. Yeah.
disrespectful. First of all, you
Yeah.
don't know him like that to be resting your hand on his shoulder, and
Mhm.
then you didn't address him as King T'Chaka or Your Highness.
Yep.
You just said T'Chaka like you knew who this guy was. Like he
Mhm.
was just like a run of the mill guy, like a person you grew up with, and you had the audacity to not address him by his title. And when
Mhm.
he said this line, I cannot remember for the life of me what that line was. But if you go and look it up, it's like,
Mhm.
it's like every hit of the line was like, wow. But
Mm.
that cartoon that they did, it was a brief run. It was very short. And I can see why it was really short because, man, let me tell you, the
Yeah.
stuff that they had in that cartoon,
Uh-huh.
I'm surprised they let it fly as long as they did. Let me just
Sure.
put it this way. If they took that cartoon and made
Mhm.
a live action, they did Black Panther like they did that cartoon,
Mhm.
Black Panther 2 made Wakanda Forever probably would not have been made. They probably like this is a
Mm.
one and done because
Mm.
of the stuff that they put in there, the stuff
Mhm.
that they were saying more so
Mhm.
than anything, especially that scene in that boardroom. That
Mhm.
boardroom scene was probably one of the best scenes in the entire cartoon. The whole cartoon was good,
Mhm.
but that line that he delivered, he was literally going in on their women. He was
Mhm.
going in on their culture, and all types of stuff just from this guy putting his hand on his shoulder and just addressing Mr. Chaka. He literally read him his Miranda rights. Like, it was crazy. You have to go watch it.
Mm.
Trust and believe. Like, I would highly suggest you go and watch it. And when you talk about your next podcast, talk about that. Like, because it is so good. But you have heard of it, right, though?
I have heard of it. Somebody else told me to watch it. Like one of my other like friends on social media told me that they had like a cartoon back in the day. And I needed to check it out. And so you're actually the second person to tell me about it.
I'll put it this way. That cartoon will have you looking at the MCU version of it in a whole different way. And you're gonna be probably sitting back in your chair like, damn, why couldn't they make it like that? Damn, like but the thing is, with the politically correct culture we're in right now, it would have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Most likely not us. We would have meshed with that very well, because a lot of us, the stuff that he said in that scene is how a lot of us wish we could talk to our bosses. Well, like if you have like, especially if you have a white boss, that's how a lot of them want to talk to you, because a lot of them will come at you in this condescending tone.
Sure.
And the way that he addressed him was with such authority. It was a lot of masculinity. He stood firm on his square. But what was so funny about the whole scene was, besides him saying what he said, after the guy put his hand on his shoulder like this, T'Chaka looked at it like he looked like did you just like it? But it kind of reminds me of the scene with Okoye and T'Challa and Everett Ross in the first movie, when he rested his hand on his shoulder and she did like this. They kind of, I can kind of, so if you can think of that scene right there, that is kind of a piggyback off of that, but it times 10.
Okay.
So keep that in mind when you see that part.
Okay. You know what? I think I'm going to watch that tonight, as a matter of fact.
Please do. Dope. Please do. I think it's still online. You should be able to find it. Like, just type in Black Panther cartoon and you should be able to find it.
Okay.
I think it might be on YouTube, because I think that's where I saw it at, but it was a few years ago. I think when I first watched it, I think I might have just graduated from college. So that was back in 2011, like around that time. So it's been a few years since I've seen it, but it used to come on BET. That's where the cartoon was was on BET when they had a brief run. And thing is, it was so low key. It was not promoted at all. So
that makes sense.
So what they probably try to play it on was, oh, the ratings aren't there, so no one's gonna watch it, so we're gonna pull the plug on it. Nah, it wasn't promoted. That's why people didn't see it. And the thing is, that was the first piece of, I guess you can say, media as far as television or anything on screen that dealt with Black Panther ever. Because that was at a time when Black Panther was not a thought to be a character in a movie, even though that character has been they've been trying to make that into a movie for so long, even before Chadwick Boseman got cast as that character. Because I think Wesley Snipes was trying to do a Black Panther movie for a while, but then when that really didn't go through, that's when he just ended up doing Blade. And then of course they wanted Michael Jai White to do it, but he couldn't get it off the ground. So then fast forward to what we have today. But yeah, please watch that cartoon. It's not even that long, unfortunately, because they pulled the plug on it. It's a few episodes, but I'm telling you, them few episodes are so rewatchable. They have so much rewatchability. Like, you'll be watching it over and over again. But keep that scene in mind that I told you about.
Yeah, I definitely will. I might actually do some little like post on Instagram and kind of do an analysis on it as well. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna find that tonight though.
I'm gonna see if I can look it up. So because I think it actually does have an actual title to it. Let me see here. Yep, it came. The first episode aired January 16th, 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, and it only has 6 episodes.
Okay.
6.
I'll definitely have to check it out. Yep.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Let me see if I can find it here. It's called Marvel Knights Animation Black Panther, and I think all the episodes are on YouTube. So you should be able to find it.
How long were the episodes?
Yeah, it was a mini series. As a matter of fact, let me pull up what it is. So if you can see it, that's what the cover looks like.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna
Yep.
have to find that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long were the episodes like each? Do you know?
I think the episodes were like 20 minutes each.
Okay.
Like 20
Gotcha.
minutes each. Yeah. Yep. It's called Black Panther. It was a mini series. Um, it actually is a pretty decent rating on IMDb. So it was like really it had a really good run, but it only had six episodes.
Gotcha.
And Jaimin Hansu was the voice of T'Challa.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
he was the
Cool.
voice of they even had a couple of episodes with Storm on there, and Jill Scott was the voice of Storm.
Interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Oh, and and speaking of the actor who played Isaiah Bradley, he was a voice actor on here as well. I'm looking at the cast list. Kerry Washington was Shuri. Alfred Woodard was on here as well. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else on here that you would be familiar with. Phil Lamar did a voice.
Yep. I remember him. Yep.
Tay Diggs was even a voice character in one of the episodes.
Interesting.
Yep. So yeah, definitely check that out.
I definitely will. Yep. I'm actually looking at it right now as we're talking. Wow.
Yeah. I told you it's really good. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I told you, like we can go about this all day.
Oh yeah.
But that's pretty much all I have for this discussion. What a way to round out, I guess you can say, this trilogy of sorts, because like I said, I didn't expect to do a part 3, but I'm so glad that a part 3 definitely came, because each conversation that I had with everybody talking about this, we all talked about different things, and it was like a stepping stone to the next conversation. But I think I'm going to cut it after this one. I said we don't need to have a part 4, 5, 6. We ain't about to do no Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween thing where it's like, okay, you can cut it off somewhere.
Right.
I think we pretty much got everything out that we needed to get out. But again, I do appreciate you for coming on though and having this conversation with me. I'm glad that you reached out to do it, because I think that is perfect that you did. It's crazy because I was looking in my Discord, and someone had left no, it's not Discord, it was on Twitter, and someone had mentioned the conversation we had last week. They said, when is the next time that you're going to have like one of these type of conversations, because the guy that you was talking to, like, you really talked about some things, so it was definitely some good reception there. So I think that people are going to enjoy seeing that you're coming back to have this conversation. And this is a long conversation. This is actually the longest one out of all of them we did right now, because I'm looking at the timer. It's an hour and 11 minutes. But you never know, like I said, when time is flying, like going by, we having good conversation. What is time?
Oh yeah.
What is time?
Yeah, most definitely. And I was gonna say, I appreciate you having me on your platform as well too. I thought this conversation was great, and yeah, I definitely would like to try to talk about some other stuff like in the future as well. So
most definitely. I do appreciate it again. But again, in case people came in late and they don't know where to find you, I let them know.
Definitely. So you can find me on Instagram at Colas Creative. You also can find me at the same screen name on Twitter as well too. And then I also am going to be starting up my YouTube at the Pro Black Blerd Kingdom podcast. And I have an actual podcast called the Pro Black Blerd Kingdom podcast that you can find me at on all major platforms.
I can't wait for you to start up that channel. I do have you like pretty much bookmarked on Spotify. So whenever you do create like another podcast, I can just go right there. And speaking of your podcast, I'm gonna just like throw this out there. Make sure y'all watch this man's podcast if you really want the raw and uncut version of him. Like what you're hearing right now, this is the toned down version. But when you listen to that podcast, it's like listening to a whole nother person. But you still gonna get it raw and uncut. And my heavy suggestion is listen to the podcast about the boys not being represented, black boys being represented in comics and like comic book movies. That, because to me, that's my favorite one. I mean, listen to all of them, but really like listen to that one. I don't care if you have to listen to that one first and then go back and and listen to the other ones because that one was really good. Because
I
that rant,
appreciate
I keep
it.
telling you, that rant was hilarious. Like I told you, I'm probably going to listen to it again today. I might listen to it after we get off of this, honestly.
Cool.
I think
I
before we get out of here,
appreciate it.
I think the part that made me laugh because I almost could not get through it was when you called that troll a wet bitch. When you said that, I was like, when you said that, I was done. I was like laughing so hard. Tears was coming out of my eyes. I barely got through the rest of it because I kept hitting the rewind 15 seconds, so I can listen to you say that all over again. I said, yes. Yes, I said that's what we need to hear because a lot of people like to sugarcoat things, but you know, you got to call it as call it as you see it. And if your timing is perfect and correct, you can really call out anything. And you was calling them people out. Now, I like how you really start off your podcast like that. You kind of started off before you get into the topic. You say, let me address these trolls first, and the names you come up with when it comes to talking about certain people, like the what was it called? What was it that you called them? The
What you
bonnet,
talking about?
the something about the bonnet or something like that.
You talking about what I'm talking about? The shea butter Sambos?
The shea butter Sambo. That one, the shea butter Sambo. And how you like how you define them, and you give them names, but then you define why you call them that. Like I'm telling y'all,
Yep.
watch that episode because what I'm talking about right now happened in that rant in that particular episode right there. So you can get yourself a good laugh. I would highly suggest that you're not driving because you might swerve from laughing too hard. So make sure safety first. Like be in a designated location where you're not moving, you're not behind like the wheel of a vehicle. Just be stationary like how I'm sitting right now and listen to it. I'm telling you, you are going to laugh so hard.
He ain't lying though.
But yeah. Well, with that being said, we about to get out of here. Y'all enjoy the rest of your day. Make sure y'all like the video, share it, subscribe if you are new, and I will talk to you all later.
All right, peace out.